What's up, guys? So I'm out here in the garage on a Friday night, kind of just doing a last minute checkup on the Turbo IS300 because tomorrow is a big day. It's the day we get this thing back on the rollers, back on the dyno to see what kind of power it makes with the whole new setup here. But before we hop right into the dyno footage and stuff, I wanted to kind of touch base with my expectations of the dyno session, and also how this dyno session is going to differ from those that I've done in the past and those that you've probably seen on the channel. So first of all, the dyno that I'm using tomorrow is actually a different dyno that I've never had the car on before. The dyno that I'm used to using and that you've probably seen in videos on the channel is a Mustang 1100 SE that I basically had access to through a previous employer. So unfortunately, that dyno is kind of out of commission right now. It's all disconnected, kind of in preparation for a move. So I don't really have the ability to get the car on that particular dyno right now. But luckily, I've got some buddies across town that have a nice shop with a nice dyno jet, and they're willing to come in on a Saturday to let me make a few rips with the Turbo IS. So the whole using a completely different dyno situation is sort of a give and take, at least in my opinion, because yeah, a dyno jet will typically spit out a little higher number than a Mustang dyno, but I have absolutely no point of reference or way to compare those numbers with what the car previously made on the other dyno. Trying to compare, figures from one dyno to a completely different brand of dyno is, in my opinion, worthless. You might as well take a number out of a hat because it'd be just as good of a comparison. So for me personally, using a different dyno is definitely more of a kind of a downside, because I'm always more concerned about the changes being made and how those changes will affect the power or the response or whatever. And so by using a completely different dyno, I lose that point of reference and the ability to really make any comparison whatsoever. But I'm trying to be kind of optimistic about it in that maybe the Turbo IS will throw down a good number on the dyno jet. Anyway, I'm not trying to say that one dyno is better or more accurate than the other. I'm just trying to kind of reinforce that a dyno is simply just a tool, and especially with an application like this where we're mainly just doing power sweeps on the dyno, it's a comparison tool. And so those comparisons are always going to be, I guess, the most accurate or the most valid when you're using data from the same dyno, right? As opposed to trying to compare stuff from different dynos. So again, I'm not really concerned with the numbers that we get tomorrow, although obviously it'd be awesome to put down some good power on the dyno jet. My goals tomorrow are more just to get the fueling and stuff dialed in for the new turbo, and just to make sure the car is running good and make sure it's still healthy and that we don't have any major issues. So once we get it dialed in on the dyno, then I'll feel a little more comfortable getting it back on the street. So like I mentioned, the shop is actually just right across town, so luckily I don't have to go too far. And one of the guys out there is nice enough to be willing to come in early on a Saturday morning and kind of help me out and let me use the dyno, so I really, really appreciate that. Most of what they do over there at their facility is diesel performance oriented stuff, which is actually a lot of what my background is, believe it or not. So that's kind of how I know the guys out there, and that's kind of why they're willing to let me use their facility a little bit. But needless to say, this will be something probably a little bit different than what they're used to seeing over there. And so it will be really interesting to not only see what it does on the dyno, but I guess how it compares to maybe some of the other stuff they have had on the dyno. But anyway, that's enough yapping. Let's fast forward to tomorrow morning into some dyno footage.